The piercing screech echoed through the quiet residential neighborhood, shattering the peace of the Sunday morning. "Help the girl! Help the girl!" The words rang out with startling clarity, followed by more frantic screeching. Wayne Collins nearly dropped his coffee mug as the cries from his backyard intensified. His African grey parrot, Sophie, had been acting strangely for days, but this was different. This wasn't her usual mimicry or playful chatter. There was something almost desperate in her calls. "Sophie!" Wayne called, sliding open the glass door to his modest backyard. "What's going on, girl?" The early autumn air held a hint of crispness as Wayne stepped onto the patio. His eyes immediately went to Sophie's outdoor enclosure. Empty. Panic surged through him until he spotted a flash of grey feathers near the back fence where an old oak tree had partially collapsed during last week's storm. Sophie was perched at the entrance of a hollow section in the fallen trunk, her feathers ruffled in obvious distress. When she saw Wayne approaching, her cries grew even more frantic. "Help the girl! Help! Help the girl!" Sophie bobbed her head urgently, refusing to leave the hollow opening despite Wayne's coaxing. "Come on, Sophie. What's gotten into you?" Wayne extended his arm as he'd done thousands of times before, but Sophie merely flapped her wings and continued her desperate calls. "Everything okay over there?" Wayne turned to see his neighbor, Sharon Miller, peering over the fence. Her brow was furrowed with concern, coffee mug clutched in her hands much like his own abandoned one on the patio table. "It's Sophie," Wayne explained, gesturing to the distressed parrot. "She's acting really strange. Won't come when called, and she keeps saying, 'Help the girl.' I've never heard her say that before." Sharon's expression shifted from mild curiosity to something more alert. "Never?" "No, never. And she won't leave that hollow in the fallen tree." Wayne ran a hand through his hair, frustration mixing with growing concern. "I don't know where she even learned those words." Sharon set her mug down and disappeared momentarily before reappearing at Wayne's gate. As a veterinary nurse, she had a way with animals that Wayne had always admired. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, weekend casual, but with the confident stride of someone who knew what they were doing. "May I?" she asked, already making her way toward the fallen oak. Wayne nodded, following close behind. "Be careful. She's not usually aggressive, but I've never seen her like this." Sharon approached slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Hey there, Sophie. What's going on, beautiful girl?" Sophie stopped screeching for a moment, her intelligent eyes fixed on Sharon. Then, with deliberate clarity, she said again, "Help the girl. Dark. Help." A chill ran down Wayne's spine. Dark? That was a new addition. Sharon knelt beside the hollow, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Can I see your flashlight?" she asked, extending her hand toward Wayne without taking her eyes off the opening. Wayne retrieved his phone from his pocket and activated the flashlight feature. Sharon took it, directing the beam into the hollow tree trunk. At first, there was nothing but shadows and decaying wood. Then a subtle glint, something reflecting the light. "There's something in there," Sharon murmured, angling the light for a better view. "Looks like, is that metal?" Wayne crouched beside her, trying to see past Sophie, who was now bobbing her head anxiously, but had at least lowered the volume of her cries. "I think it's a bracelet," Sharon said, squinting. "I can't quite reach it." Wayne went to his shed and returned with a garden rake. Gently coaxing Sophie to move slightly to the side, he extended the handle into the hollow. With careful maneuvering, he managed to drag the object closer to the opening. Sharon gasped when she saw it clearly. A delicate silver charm bracelet sized for a child's wrist. One of the charms, a small butterfly, caught the sunlight, sending reflections dancing across the grass. "That's not all," Wayne said, his voice tight as he directed the light deeper into the hollow. "There's something else." Sharon leaned in, her shoulder pressing against Wayne's as they both peered into the darkness. Sophie had gone quiet, watchful, as if she knew the gravity of what they were about to discover. The beam illuminated what looked like fabric, something dark blue, wadded up and pushed deep into the hollow. Wayne worked the rake handle carefully, hooking the material and slowly drawing it out. A small backpack emerged, the kind elementary school children carry. The blue fabric was dirty and weather-worn, but the unicorn patch on the front pocket was still colorful and unmistakable. Wayne and Sharon exchanged glances, the same thought evident in both their expressions. Sophie had gone back to her urgent calls, quieter now, but no less insistent. "Help the girl. Dark. Help the girl." "We need to call the police," Sharon said, her professional composure momentarily cracking. "Right now." Wayne was already pulling out his phone when Sophie suddenly launched herself from the tree hollow, circling frantically before landing on his shoulder, her talons gripping just tight enough to steady herself without causing pain. "Help the girl," she said directly into his ear, her voice almost a whisper. "Who taught you that, Sophie?" Wayne asked, his skin prickling with goosebumps, despite the warming day. "Where did you learn those words?" Sophie merely ruffled her feathers and repeated, "Dark. Help the girl." Within 20 minutes, Wayne's quiet backyard had transformed into a hub of activity. 2 police cruisers parked on the street, and Officer Jack Thompson knelt by the tree hollow, carefully documenting everything with photographs before collecting the bracelet and backpack into evidence bags. "How long has this tree been down?" Jack asked, his pen poised over his notepad. "About a week," Wayne replied. "The storm last weekend took out a bunch of old trees in the neighborhood. I was waiting for a service to come remove it next week." Jack nodded, making notes. "And your Parrot, Sophie, right? When did she start this behavior?" Wayne thought back. "She's been acting odd for about 3 days, kept trying to get out of her enclosure to fly to this tree. But the calling for help only started this morning." "That's not entirely true," Sharon interjected. "I heard her yesterday afternoon. I thought she was just mimicking a TV show or something." Jack looked up sharply. "And you're certain you've never taught her these phrases? Never had conversations about helping someone, especially a girl, where Sophie could hear?" Wayne shook his head emphatically. "Never. Sophie picks up lots of phrases. She can mimic my phone ringtone perfectly and does a spot-on impression of my microwave beeping. But help the girl is not something she would have heard from me." Sophie, now perched on the back of a garden chair, watched the proceedings with remarkable focus. When Jack approached her, she remained calm, tilting her head as if assessing him. "Smart bird," Jack remarked. "African greys are known for their intelligence. They don't just mimic, they understand context to some degree." He turned his attention back to the evidence bags. "We'll run tests on these items. The backpack has a name tag, but it's too muddy to read clearly right now. We'll clean it carefully at the lab." As Jack was speaking, Sophie suddenly took flight again, this time heading to the fence line bordering the property behind Wayne's, the only house on the block that backed up to his yard from the next street over. "Help the girl!" Her cries resumed with newfound urgency. "Help the girl! Dark!" Jack, Wayne and Sharon exchanged glances before following the Parrot. Sophie was now perched on the fence, her head bobbing as she looked back and forth between them and the house beyond. "Who lives there?" Jack asked, his casual tone belied by the alertness in his posture. "The Morgans," Wayne replied. "They moved in about a year ago. Keep to themselves mostly. I've only spoken to them a few times when our mail got mixed up." Jack radioed his partner, who had been canvassing the rest of the neighborhood. "Davis, check property records for the residents at 247 Oakwood Lane. The name should be Morgan." Sophie continued her calls, growing increasingly agitated when they didn't immediately act on her apparent warning. "I think we need to pay the Morgans a visit," Jack said, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his holster. "Mr. Collins, I'd advise you and Miss Miller to remain here until we've had a chance to speak with your neighbors." Wayne nodded, but a sudden thought struck him. "Wait, the Morgans have a daughter. Young girl, very quiet. I've only seen her a handful of times, usually getting into their car for school." Jack's expression darkened. "Stay here," he repeated, more firmly this time. He spoke into his radio again, requesting additional officers for a welfare check at the Morgan residence. As Jack and his partner headed back to their cruisers to drive around to Oakwood Lane, Sophie finally flew back to Wayne, landing gently on his outstretched arm. She seemed calmer now that action was being taken, but her eyes remained fixed on the fence line. "What did you see, Sophie?" Wayne whispered, stroking her feathers gently. "What happened to the girl?" Sophie ruffled her feathers, pressing closer to Wayne's chest as if seeking comfort. For a moment, She was just a parrot again. His companion of many years, intelligent but still just a bird. Then she turned her head toward the Morgan house and said with perfect clarity, "Bad man, hurt girl. Dark. Help." Sharon's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Wayne felt his blood run cold. They both stared at the house beyond the fence, suddenly seeing the quiet, unremarkable residence in a sinister new light. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. The next hour passed in a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. Wayne and Sharon remained in the backyard, Sophie now quieter but still vigilant on her perch. They watched as more police vehicles arrived at the Morgan residence, followed by an ambulance that parked with its lights flashing but sirens silent, a sight that sent a fresh wave of dread through Wayne. "What do you think is happening?" Sharon whispered, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warming day. Wayne shook his head, unable to form words around the knot in his throat. Sophie shuffled closer on her perch, pressing against his arm as if offering comfort. Officer Jack Thompson returned to Wayne's yard, his face grim as he ducked through the gate. The confident stride from earlier had given way to something heavier, more burdened. "We need to talk," he said, gesturing toward the house. "Inside would be better." Wayne led them to his kitchen, where Sophie immediately flew to her indoor perch near the window, a spot that offered a clear view of both the backyard and the Morgan residence beyond. Jack declined Wayne's offer of coffee with a tight shake of his head. "First, I need to ask again, are you absolutely certain your parrot has never heard those phrases before? Could she have overheard a TV show, a phone conversation, anything?" "I'm certain," Wayne replied. "I've had Sophie since she was young. I know her vocabulary. These are completely new phrases." Jack nodded slowly, seeming to accept this. "The items you found, the bracelet and backpack, they belong to Bella Morgan, age 7. She was reported missing by her school 3 days ago when she didn't show up, and the school couldn't reach her parents." "Missing?" Sharon's voice cracked. "But I saw her just last week walking with her father." "That's consistent with the timeline," Jack confirmed. "According to neighbors, Bella was last seen publicly on Saturday afternoon with her father, Robert Morgan." "What about Mrs. Morgan?" Wayne asked, suddenly realizing he'd rarely seen the mother and daughter together. "Louise Morgan is currently being treated for injuries at County General. She was found unconscious in the basement of the residence." Jack paused, choosing his words carefully. "The situation is complicated. Mrs. Morgan appears to have been held against her will." Sophie suddenly flapped her wings, creating a momentary distraction. "Bad man," she said clearly. "Bad man hurt girl." Jack's attention snapped to the parrot. "We believe Robert Morgan fled with Bella when he realized the school would be reporting her absence. His car is missing and neighbors report not seeing him since Saturday evening." Wayne felt sick. The quiet neighbor who had occasionally accepted mail deliveries for him was now the subject of a manhunt. And Bella, the shy child with the unicorn backpack, was missing with him. "But how does Sophie know anything about this?" Sharon asked, voicing the question that hung heavy in the air. "How could she possibly know to say, 'Help the girl'?" Jack pulled out his notepad again. "That's what I need to understand. African grey parrots have remarkable memories and cognitive abilities, but this goes beyond simple mimicry. She seems to be trying to communicate specific information." As if on cue, Sophie hopped down from her perch and waddled across the kitchen counter to where Jack had placed his notepad. With remarkable precision, she pecked at the corner of the page. "Paper," she said, then bobbed her head. "Paper. Girl, write paper." The 3 humans exchanged bewildered glances. "What is she trying to tell us?" Wayne wondered aloud, approaching his parrot slowly. Jack's brow furrowed in concentration. "The tree hollow where the backpack was found, it faces directly toward the Morgan's basement window, doesn't it?" Wayne nodded slowly as understanding dawned. "Sophie's outdoor enclosure is positioned so she can see both the tree and that window. She has perfect sight lines." "She saw something," Sharon whispered. "She actually witnessed something happening." Jack was already on his radio, requesting the forensics team to check the basement window for any signs that it had been used as an escape route or communication point. Wayne gently stroked Sophie's head. "What did you see, girl? What happened to Bella?" Sophie tilted her head, her intelligent eyes focused intently on Wayne. Girl, write paper. Throw paper. Help girl. A note, Jack said suddenly. She's saying Bella wrote a note. We need to search that tree hollow again, more thoroughly this time. They rushed back outside to the fallen oak. Jack donned gloves and began a methodical examination of the hollow, reaching deep into crevices they hadn't explored earlier. Sophie flew to a branch directly above, watching the proceedings with obvious interest. There, she squawked, bobbing her head toward a particular section. There. Jack directed his flashlight where Sophie indicated, revealing a small gap in the inner wood. Carefully, he worked his fingers into the space and extracted a tightly folded piece of paper, notebook paper torn from a child's journal, the edges ragged as if ripped in haste. With careful movements, Jack unfolded the note. The handwriting was childish but legible, written in purple marker. Help! Dad won't let me and Mom leave. He locked Mom in basement. I'm scared. If you find this, please call police. The note was signed simply Bella, with a tiny heart drawn beside the name. Sharon made a small, pained sound. Wayne felt his chest tighten as the reality of what had been happening just yards from his home sank in. She threw it from the window, Jack murmured, piecing it together. Must have seen Sophie in her enclosure and hoped someone would find the note. And Sophie saw her, Wayne concluded, looking up at his parrot with newfound wonder. She saw Bella throw the note into the tree but couldn't reach it herself. Instead, she tried to get your attention, Jack said. When the tree fell in the storm, she finally had access to where the note and Bella's things were hidden. Sophie flew down to Wayne's shoulder, nuzzling against his cheek in a rare display of affection. Help, girl, she repeated, but softer now, almost mournful. We need to find her, Sharon said, her professional composure returning. If Robert Morgan has been keeping his wife prisoner and now has fled with Bella, she didn't need to finish the thought. The gravity of the situation hung heavily over them. Jack's radio crackled to life. A voice reported that Louise Morgan was conscious and providing information about possible locations where her husband might have taken their daughter. A statewide alert had been issued for Robert's vehicle, and roadblocks were being established on major highways leading out of the county. We're throwing everything we have at this, Jack assured them, carefully placing Bella's note into an evidence bag. This note gives us a timeline and confirmation of Mrs. Morgan's statements. It's incredibly valuable evidence. As Jack stepped away to coordinate with other officers, Wayne turned to Sharon, his voice low. I keep thinking about how many times I must have heard Sophie trying to tell me something was wrong. How many days has she been trying to get my attention? Sharon placed a gentle hand on his arm. Don't do that to yourself. You couldn't have known. She kept trying to reach that tree after the storm. I thought she was just being stubborn or curious. Wayne's voice broke slightly. If I'd listened sooner. You're listening now, Sharon said firmly. That's what matters. Sophie had gone quiet, her eyes tracking the movement of police officers through the yards. Occasionally she would ruffle her feathers or shift position, but the frantic energy from earlier had dissipated now that her message had been understood. Jack returned, his expression slightly lighter. We've got a possible location. Robert Morgan owns a small cabin about 40 miles north of here, near the Lake District. It's registered under his mother's maiden name, but Mrs. Morgan knew about it. Teams are headed there now. Will you let us know? Wayne asked. When you find Bella? Jack nodded. I will, and we'll need formal statements from both of you, but that can wait until tomorrow. He glanced at Sophie. I never thought I'd say this, but your parrot is a material witness. The DA might want to document her vocabulary and behavior. Under different circumstances, the notion might have been amusing. Now, it just underscored the severity of the situation. As Jack left to join the search teams, Wayne and Sharon settled in for an anxious wait. Sophie returned to her indoor perch, uncharacteristically subdued as the hours passed. Neither Wayne nor Sharon felt like leaving, so they sat together at the kitchen table, making occasional small talk, but mostly watching the clock and jumping whenever a phone rang. Night had fallen when Jack finally called. Wayne put the phone on speaker so Sharon could hear. We found them, Jack said, his voice tinny through the speaker, but unmistakably relieved. Bella is safe. She's being checked out by medical personnel, but preliminary assessment is she's physically unharmed. Wayne felt tears spring to his eyes as the tension of the day released in a rush. Sharon squeezed his hand across the table, her own eyes shining. "And Morgan?" she asked. "In custody," Jack confirmed. "He surrendered when he realized he was surrounded. We caught him as he was packing to leave the cabin. Looked like he was planning to cross the state line tonight." "Thank God," Wayne breathed. "There's more," Jack continued. "When we told Bella we found her note, she asked about the grey bird. She said she'd been throwing notes out the basement window for days, hoping someone would find them. She saw Sophie watching and specifically tried to get her attention." Wayne looked over at Sophie, who had perked up at the sound of Jack's voice on the speaker. "She understood," he said wonderingly. "She knew Bella needed help." "African greys are extraordinary animals," Jack replied, "but even knowing their intelligence, I've never seen anything quite like this. Your Sophie might have just changed how we think about animal cognition and communication." After ending the call, Wayne approached Sophie's perch. "You did it, girl," he said softly, offering her favorite treat, a walnut half from his palm. "You saved her." Sophie took the treat delicately, then looked directly at Wayne. "Girl safe now," she said clearly, before beginning to crack open the nut. Wayne and Sharon exchanged startled glances. "Did she just—" Sharon began. Wayne nodded slowly. "She did. That's a completely new phrase." They watched in amazed silence as Sophie ate her treat, seemingly unaware of the profound impact of her words. The parrot who had insisted on helping a frightened child now appeared satisfied that her mission was complete. Outside, the last police car pulled away from the Morgan house, its lights cutting through the darkness before disappearing around the corner. Tomorrow would bring formal statements, evidence processing, and the beginning of a long road to justice and healing for Bella and her mother. But tonight, in the quiet aftermath of crisis, Wayne finally understood what he'd always suspected, that the bond between humans and animals ran deeper and more complex than most people realized. And sometimes that bond could bridge the gap between species to accomplish something truly remarkable. Sophie fluffed her feathers and settled in for the night, her intelligent eyes half closed in contentment. For now, at least, all was well in her world. The girl was safe, the bad man caught, and her humans had finally understood her warning call. The courthouse was quieter than Wayne had expected. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air as people spoke in hushed tones. It had been several months since that fateful day, when Sophie had refused to leave the tree hollow, and today marked the conclusion of Robert Morgan's trial. Wayne sat beside Sharon in the gallery, their shoulders nearly touching. Their friendship had deepened through shared experience, blossoming into something neither had anticipated but both welcomed. Sharon's steady presence had been a constant during the tumultuous weeks of investigation, interviews, and preliminary hearings. "Nervous?" Sharon whispered, noticing Wayne's fingers drumming against his knee. He nodded. "I still can't believe they actually included Sophie's behavior in the evidence presentation." The prosecution had indeed built part of their case around Sophie's remarkable actions, bringing in animal behavior experts to explain how African grey parrots process information and communicate. While Sophie herself hadn't appeared in court, despite one defense attorney's bizarre request, videos of her behavior and vocabulary had been shown to the jury. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and heads turned to see Louise Morgan enter with Bella at her side. The physical bruises of their ordeal had healed, though Wayne knew from conversations with victim advocates that the emotional recovery would take much longer. Still, there was a quiet strength in Louise's posture as she guided her daughter to seats near the front. Bella spotted Wayne and Sharon, offering a small wave. The child looked different now, her hair longer, her face less shadowed. She had visited Wayne's home several times in recent months, forming a special bond with Sophie that fascinated child psychologists working on her case. The bailiff called for all to rise as the judge entered. The verdict had been reached the previous day, and today was the sentencing. Robert Morgan sat at the defense table, diminished in his orange jumpsuit, a far cry from the quiet neighbor who had collected Wayne's misdirected mail. As the judge delivered the sentence, 20 years without possibility of early parole, Wayne felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was relief that justice had been served, sorrow for the suffering Bella and Louise had endured, and lingering disbelief that such darkness had existed just yards from his home. The evidence had revealed years of escalating control and abuse, culminating in Robert's decision to imprison his wife and isolate his daughter when Louise had finally gathered the courage to leave him. If not for a fallen tree, a desperate child's notes, and an extraordinary parrot, the outcome might have been unimaginably worse. When court adjourned, Wayne and Sharon made their way to Louise and Bella. "It's really over," Louise said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "We can finally move forward." "Have you decided what you'll do?" Sharon asked gently. Louise nodded. "My sister has a place near the coast. We're moving there next month. New schools, new start, fresh air." She smiled down at Bella. "And plenty of bird watching." Bella looked up at Wayne. "Can I say goodbye to Sophie before we go?" "Of course," Wayne replied. "She'd be offended if you didn't." Outside, the autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves. Wayne found himself looking at his neighborhood with new eyes, the neat houses, the carefully maintained yards, the secrets hidden behind closed doors. He'd lived here for years, yet had never truly known what transpired in the homes around him. Later that afternoon, Louise and Bella arrived at Wayne's house for their farewell visit. Sophie, as if sensing the importance of the occasion, was on her best behavior, showcasing her vocabulary and interactive games without prompting. "We have something for Sophie," Bella announced, reaching into her new backpack, turquoise with silver stars, not a unicorn in sight. She pulled out a small handcrafted perch decorated with colorful beads and carefully sanded smooth. "I made it in therapy. It's a thank you present." Wayne accepted the gift, touched by the thoughtfulness. "She'll love it." Louise hung back slightly, watching her daughter. "The therapist says making it was important for Bella's healing, creating something positive connected to what happened." "It's beautiful workmanship," Sharon observed, examining the perch with genuine admiration. Bella approached Sophie's cage, speaking softly to the parrot. "You're a hero bird," she told Sophie seriously, "the best hero bird ever." Sophie tilted her head, regarding Bella with that peculiar intelligence that still took Wayne's breath away sometimes. "Bella's safe now," the parrot said clearly, using the phrase she'd developed after the rescue. "Bella safe." The child's face lit up with delight. "She remembers my name." "She certainly does," Wayne confirmed. "She asks about you whenever she sees Officer Jack, too." Jack Thompson had become a regular visitor, initially for follow-up questions about the case, but later simply as a friend. He'd taken a particular interest in Sophie, even consulting with bird behavior specialists at the university about her remarkable actions. As they shared a farewell lunch on Wayne's patio, the conversation turned to the future. Louise spoke of her plans to finish the nursing degree she'd abandoned years ago when Robert's controlling behavior had made education impossible. Bella chatted about the ocean creatures she hoped to see at their new home. "What about you two?" Louise asked, glancing between Wayne and Sharon with a knowing smile. Sharon colored slightly. "We're taking things slowly." "But surely," Wayne added, reaching for Sharon's hand. The connection between them had grown naturally, built on mutual respect and shared experience. As the afternoon waned, final goodbyes were exchanged with promises to stay in touch. Bella hugged Sophie's cage carefully, whispering something only the parrot could hear. Then they were gone, driving toward their new beginning. Wayne installed Bella's handcrafted perch in Sophie's cage that evening. The parrot examined it thoroughly before cautiously stepping onto it, testing its sturdiness before settling comfortably. "What do you think, girl?" Wayne asked. "Nice gift, isn't it?" Sophie ruffled her feathers in apparent satisfaction. "Nice gift," she echoed. "Bella, good girl." Sharon, who had stayed to help prepare dinner, paused in slicing vegetables. "She continues to amaze me. It's like she understands the whole situation." "The specialist from the university believes she might," Wayne replied, joining Sharon at the counter. "Dr. Rivera says Sophie didn't just mimic random phrases. She contextually understood that Bella needed help and figured out how to communicate that need. Changing how we think about animal cognition, just like Jack said." Sharon smiled, setting down her knife. "The article in the Science Journal comes out next month, right?" Wayne nodded. Sophie's case had drawn attention from animal behaviorists and cognitive scientists across the country. Dr. Rivera had conducted extensive sessions with the parrot, documenting her vocabulary, comprehension, and problem-solving abilities. The resulting paper promised to challenge existing understanding of avian intelligence. "Fame hasn't gone to her head, at least," Wayne joked, nodding towards Sophie, who was now preening contentedly on her new perch, the picture of ordinary parrot behavior. After dinner, as they sat together on the sofa watching the evening news, a feature story about the case appeared. The reporter stood outside the courthouse summarizing the trial's conclusion and the heroic parrot that had helped save a child from danger. "That's not exactly how it happened," Sharon commented, frowning slightly at the simplified narrative. "No, but the true story is harder to explain in a 60-second news clip," Wayne replied. "The reality is more complex and more remarkable." The reality was that a child in danger had tried desperately to communicate her need for help, and an intelligent bird had recognized that communication and persisted until humans understood. It wasn't just Sophie who had saved Bella. It was Bella's own courage in throwing those notes, Louise's strength in surviving until help arrived, and the community that ultimately responded. As the news segment ended, Sophie flew from her cage to land on the back of the sofa, settling between Wayne and Sharon with comfortable familiarity. "What do you think of your TV appearance?" Sharon asked the parrot, scratching gently at the feathers on Sophie's neck. Sophie simply closed her eyes in contentment, leaning into the touch. After a moment, she opened one eye and said quite distinctly, "Family safe now." Wayne and Sharon exchanged surprised glances. It was another new phrase, one neither had heard before. "Family," Sophie repeated, looking between them. "Safe." Wayne felt something catch in his throat. The parrot had an uncanny ability to articulate what often went unspoken. In the months since Bella's rescue, their improvised family had indeed formed. Wayne, Sharon, Sophie, with regular visits from Jack, occasional calls from Louise and Bella, and even Dr. Rivera joining their circle as both researcher and friend. From tragedy had come connection. From darkness had come understanding. The neighborhood had changed too, with neighbors more attentive to one another, community watch programs established, and a new awareness that sometimes the most vulnerable among us communicate in ways we must learn to hear. Spring arrived with gentle rains that coaxed new growth from soil still holding winter's chill. Wayne's backyard had been transformed, the fallen oak removed, the fence repaired, and a garden planted in the sunny spot where the tree had once stood. Sharon had moved in officially, bringing her expertise in gardening along with her warmth and steady presence. On a particularly fine Saturday morning, they received unexpected visitors. Louise and Bella stood on the front porch, looking tanned and healthy from coastal living. Bella clutched a small gift bag decorated with paw prints and feathers. "Surprise!" the child announced, bouncing slightly with excitement. "We were coming through town and had to stop." Over brunch in the backyard, they caught up on months of news. Bella was thriving in her new school, making friends and excelling in science classes. Louise had completed her first semester of nursing school with honors. Their lives, once constrained by fear, now expanded with possibility. Sophie, initially shy with the visitors, gradually warmed up, showing off new vocabulary and tricks she'd learned. When Bella presented her gift, a special blend of parrot treats from a coastal specialty shop, Sophie bobbed her head in apparent gratitude. "I told my whole class about Sophie," Bella informed them proudly. "My teacher said we should write to National Geographic about her." "Dr. Rivera's article has actually caught their attention," Wayne revealed. "They're sending a photographer next month for a feature on animal cognition." As the visit wound down and farewells approached, Bella asked to speak privately with Sophie. Wayne and Sharon discreetly stepped away, giving the child a moment alone with the parrot who had played such a pivotal role in her rescue. "What do you think she's telling her?" Sharon whispered, watching from a distance as Bella spoke earnestly to Sophie, who listened with characteristic tilted head attention. "Some things are just between friends," Wayne replied, slipping his arm around Sharon's waist. Later, after Louise and Bella had departed with promises to visit again in summer, Sophie seemed particularly content, preening her feathers in the afternoon sunlight. "Good visit?" Wayne asked her. Sophie looked up. "Bella happy now," she said clearly. Family all happy. Yes, Wayne agreed, exchanging a smile with Sharon. We are. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in watercolor hues, Wayne stood at the back fence looking toward where the Morgan house stood. New owners had moved in months ago, a young couple with a friendly golden retriever who often played in the yard. The shadows that had once hung over the property had dissipated, replaced by the sounds of laughter and ordinary domesticity. Sharon joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about perception," Wayne replied. "How we see what we expect to see until something or someone forces us to look deeper." Above them, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside, Sophie called out a cheerful good night, her voice carrying through the open window. Life had returned to normal, or rather, had established a new normal, one enriched by deeper connections and heightened awareness. Wayne thought about the complex chain of events that had brought them here. A storm that felled a tree, a child's desperate notes, a parrot with extraordinary perception, and the human connections that formed in response to crisis. The neighborhood settled into evening quietude, porch lights glowing like earthbound stars. In homes all around them, families went about their evening routines, most unaware of how one remarkable bird had changed the lives of those who had learned to listen. "Family safe," Sophie had said, and in those simple words lay a profound truth. They had formed something precious and lasting, not just Wayne, Sharon, and Sophie, but the wider circle that now included Louise and Bella, Jack, Dr. Rivera, and others who had been touched by their story. Some would call it coincidence that a storm had felled the exact tree where Bella's notes had landed, or that Wayne happened to have a parrot intelligent enough to understand the significance of what she witnessed. Others might see the hand of fate or providence. Wayne preferred to see it simply as a reminder that compassion could cross all boundaries, even species, when someone in need called for help, and that sometimes the heroes who answer that call have feathers instead of capes. As night fell completely, Wayne and Sharon returned inside, closing the door on a world that seemed both larger and more intimately connected than it had been before. Sophie greeted them with a cheerful whistle from her perch, sentinel and friend, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. The warning call had been heard, the story had found its resolution, and in the quiet aftermath, life continued, altered, enriched, and infinitely more aware of the remarkable bonds that connect us all. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.